Right? You know what breaks most people's hearts? They think love is about chasing words, chasing attention, chasing reassurance. But real love, deep love, is revealed in transformation. And if you've ever loved someone emotionally avoidant, you know this truth. They don't fall in love loudly, they fall in love courageously. Because for an avoidant person, intimacy feels dangerous. Vulnerability feels like standing unarmed in the middle of a battlefield. So when they begin lowering those walls for you, that's not casual. That's monumental. Listen to me carefully. The number one way an avoidant lover shows they're falling for you is this. They begin allowing themselves to be seen. Not perfect, not polished, not in control. Seen. And most people miss this miracle because they're waiting for fireworks while love is quietly happening in the soul. See, human beings are wired for connection. But somewhere along the journey, pain taught some people that connection equals danger.
Maybe they were.
Rejected. Maybe they were abandoned. Maybe they learned that depending on someone leads to suffering. So they built emotional armor. And armor protects you, but it also imprisons you. That's why when an avoidant person starts texting you first, staying longer, opening up, asking for your presence, sharing pieces of themselves they normally hide from the world, you are witnessing something sacred. You are witnessing fear losing its grip. And here's what you must understand. Love is not measured, by how loudly someone feels. Love is measured by what they are willing to risk emotionally. Anyone can say, I love you, but can they surrender control? Can they trust? Can they soften? Can they stay?
That is the true language of love.
Because the strongest relationships are not built by perfect people. They are built by two souls willing to heal in each other's presence. And if you are loving an avoidant person, your power is not in forcing them open. Your power is in creating safety without losing yourself. That is wisdom. Too many people try to win love through pressure, but pressure creates resistance. Human beings bloom where they feel safe, respected, and understood. You see, when an avoidant person feels judged, they retreat. When they feel controlled, they disappear. But when they feel emotionally safe, something extraordinary happens. Their heart begins to come alive again. And this is where divine principles enter the relationship. Love is patience. Love is presence. Love is consistency. Love is truth without force. Real love does not manipulate transformation. It inspires transformation. The soul opens naturally where fear is no longer needed. And maybe the deeper lesson here is not just about them falling in love with you. Maybe it's about you learning the difference between chasing love and embodying love. Because when you embody peace, confidence, and emotional strength, you stop begging for connection. You become the kind of presence that invites truth. That changes everything. Now hear me clearly. Do not confuse avoidant behavior with inability to love. Some of the people who fear love the most actually feel it the deepest. They just never learned how to carry it safely. So when they begin trying, really trying, honor that growth. Not every step will be perfect. Not every moment will be smooth. But healing love is rarely loud. Sometimes the greatest declaration of love is simply this: I'm scared, but I'm still here. And that, my friend, is courage. At the end of the day, every human being wants the same thing: to be accepted without pretending, to be loved without performing, to be safe enough to remove the mask. That is what transforms relationships. That is what transforms hearts. And that is what transforms lives. Because the moment someone who spent their entire life hiding finally chooses connection over protection, that is not ordinary love. That is a soul awakening. One of the most powerful signs an avoidant lover is falling for you is when they slowly begin letting you into their emotional world. Now, to most people, This may not seem dramatic at first. It may not come with huge declarations of love, emotional speeches, or overwhelming affection. In fact, if you are expecting loud expressions, you may completely miss the significance of what is actually happening. Because for an avoidant person, emotional openness is not casual, it is deeply vulnerable. Every small act of honesty is a risk. Every moment of emotional exposure feels like stepping into unknown territory without protection. You have to understand, avoidant individuals often learned early in life that emotions were unsafe. Maybe they were criticized for expressing feelings. Maybe they experienced rejection, abandonment, betrayal, or emotional inconsistency. Somewhere along the way, they created an internal belief that depending on others leads to pain. So they became self-reliant, independent, guarded. They built emotional walls not because they do not feel deeply, but because they fear what happens when they do. That's why when an avoidant lover begins sharing their inner world with you, it is one of the clearest indicators that their heart is opening. And this opening rarely happens all at once. It happens in layers. At first, it may look small. They tell you about something stressful at work instead of handling it alone. They admit they were hurt by something you said instead of withdrawing in silence. They share childhood memory they normally keep buried. They confess fears, insecurities, or dreams they do not reveal to other people. These moments may seem ordinary to someone naturally expressive, but for an avoidant person, these are emotional breakthroughs. Because emotionally avoidant people are masters at hiding vulnerability. They often present themselves as strong, composed, and unaffected. They may joke instead of expressing pain. They may disappear instead of explaining emotions. They may intellectualize feelings instead of truly feeling them. Vulnerability threatens the identity they built to survive. So when they begin allowing you to see beyond the mask, it means trust is developing at a profound level, and trust is everything to them. You see, avoidant people do not usually fear love itself. They fear the loss of control that love requires. Love asks people to be seen, to be known, to need someone. And needing someone can feel terrifying for a person who has spent years, convincing themselves they only need themselves. So when they start opening emotionally, they are not just sharing information, they are challenging years of emotional conditioning. This is why patience matters so much in relationships with avoidant individuals. If you pressure them to open faster than they are ready, they may retreat. Not because they do not care, but because emotional exposure can overwhelm their nervous system. They need to feel safe, not forced. The more emotionally safe they feel around you, the more naturally they begin revealing who they truly are beneath the protective layers. And here is something important many people misunderstand. Emotional openness from an avoidant person may not look polished or smooth. Sometimes it comes awkwardly. Sometimes it comes in fragments. Sometimes they may open up deeply one day and pull back the next. That inconsistency does not always mean they are losing feelings. Often, it means they are battling internal fear while trying to stay connected at the same time. This is where emotional maturity becomes essential. If you only measure love through constant reassurance or dramatic emotional displays, then you are not measuring love at all. You may overlook the quiet courage it takes for an avoidant person to slowly let someone into their inner world. Their vulnerability may come in subtle ways. Longer conversations, honest admissions, moments of softness, unexpected affection, or simply staying present during difficult emotional moments instead of shutting down completely. Those moments matter because every time they choose openness over avoidance, they are rewriting an old survival pattern. Every time they trust you with something emotionally meaningful, they are taking a step toward deeper connection. And the truth is, people only do that when someone begins to matter deeply to them. When an avoidant lover starts allowing themselves to be emotionally seen, it is not weakness. It is one of the strongest acts of courage a human being can make. One of the clearest signs an avoidant lover is falling for you is when consistency begins replacing distance. This shift may seem simple on the surface, but emotionally it represents a massive transformation. Avoidant individuals are often known for unpredictability. One moment they are close, warm, and deeply engaged, and the next moment they seem distant, unavailable, or emotionally detached. This push and pull dynamic usually comes from an internal battle between wanting connection and fearing the vulnerability that connection creates. For an avoidant person, closeness can feel emotionally overwhelming. The deeper the connection becomes, the more their protective instincts activate. They may suddenly need space, become less communicative, or emotionally retreat without explanation. It's not always because they have stopped caring. In many cases, it's because intimacy triggers fear they do not fully understand themselves. Their nervous system interprets emotional dependence as danger, so distance becomes a coping mechanism. That's why consistency is such a powerful sign of love from an avoidant partner. When they begin showing up regularly emotionally, mentally, and physically, it means they are slowly choosing connection over self-protection. It means they are no longer allowing fear to completely control the relationship. And consistency is not just about frequency of communication. It's about emotional reliability. It's about becoming someone you can count on, Instead of disappearing when emotions intensify, they stay engaged. Instead of leaving you confused for days, they make an effort to communicate. Instead of treating the relationship like something temporary or uncertain, they begin nurturing it with intention. This change does not happen accidentally. Avoidant individuals highly value independence and emotional control. Many of them learned early in life that relying on others leads to disappointment or pain. As a result, they become extremely self-sufficient. They often convince themselves they do not need anyone too deeply because needing someone feels unsafe. But love challenges that belief. Real connection slowly breaks down emotional defenses. And when an avoidant person begins consistently making space for you in their life, it means you are becoming emotionally significant to them. You may notice it in small ways first. They text back more regularly. They stop disappearing during emotional conversations. They begin checking in, on you without being prompted. They make plans and actually follow through. They become more available during difficult moments instead of emotionally shutting down. What once felt uncertain begins feeling stable, and stability is deeply meaningful for someone with avoidant tendencies because consistency requires vulnerability. To consistently show up for someone means allowing emotional attachment to grow. It means accepting the possibility of dependence, disappointment, and emotional exposure. These are the very things avoidant individuals spend years trying to avoid. This is why their consistency often develops gradually rather than instantly. They are learning how to remain emotionally present without feeling trapped. They are learning that closeness does not have to erase their identity or independence. And perhaps most importantly, they are learning that safe love does not demand perfection. Now, this process is rarely flawless. An avoidant person may still need moments of solitude. They may still struggle expressing emotions openly, but the difference is they stop using distance as their primary response to intimacy. Instead of constantly pulling away whenever emotions deepen, they begin finding ways to stay connected even when vulnerability feels uncomfortable. That is growth, because real emotional maturity is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to remain present despite fear. And when an avoidant lover becomes consistent, they are demonstrating exactly that. They are showing you that your connection matters enough for them to challenge their old patterns. They are showing you that they no longer want love only on their terms or only at a safe emotional distance. They are beginning to invest emotionally in ways they once resisted. Many people underestimate how significant this shift truly is. They look for dramatic, romantic gestures while overlooking the quiet miracle of emotional reliability. But for someone who once withdrew whenever, intimacy, increased consistency is a profound act of love. It says, I am learning not to run. It says, I am trying to trust this connection. It says, even when closeness scares me, I still want to stay. And perhaps that is one of the deepest forms of love. There is not perfect communication, not endless passion, but the decision to remain emotionally present when every old survival instinct says to retreat. One of the most meaningful signs an avoidant lover is falling for you is when they begin including you in their future. For many people, talking about future plans may seem natural or even casual. But for someone with avoidant tendencies, it carries enormous emotional weight. Avoidant individuals are often deeply protective of their freedom, independence, and emotional autonomy. They tend to live in ways that minimize emotional dependency because dependency feels risky to them. So when they start making future-oriented decisions that involve you, it signals a profound shift in how they view the relationship. You have to understand that avoidant people often keep relationships emotionally compartmentalized in the beginning. They may enjoy connection, companionship, attraction, and even affection, but they maintain an invisible emotional exit door. Part of them stays prepared to detach if things become too intense. This is not necessarily because they are dishonest or manipulative. In many cases, it is a defense mechanism rooted in fear of vulnerability, rejection, or loss of control. That's why future planning becomes such a powerful indicator of emotional investment. When an avoidant person starts imagining you in their future, they are no longer relating to you as someone temporary. They are allowing emotional permanence to enter their mind, and for someone who fears attachment, that can feel incredibly vulnerable. At first, these future references may appear subtle. They may mention a trip you should take together months from now. They may talk about events, holidays, or plans, assuming you will be there beside them. They may ask about your long-term goals, your dreams, or the kind of life you want to build. These conversations are not random. They reflect emotional inclusion. And emotional inclusion matters deeply because avoidant individuals often separate their inner world from others. They may enjoy spending time with people while still maintaining emotional distance internally. But when they begin integrating you into their long-term, thinking it means the relationship is moving beyond surface-level connection, it means they are starting to see you as emotionally important to their life journey. This shift requires tremendous courage from them. Why? Because thinking about a future with someone means acknowledging attachment. It means accepting that losing the relationship would hurt. It means allowing another person to emotionally matter. And avoidant individuals often spend years trying to avoid exactly that level of emotional dependence. Many avoidant people unconsciously believe that deep attachment leads to pain. Some grew up in emotionally inconsistent environments where trust felt unstable. Others experienced heartbreak, abandonment, criticism, or emotional neglect that taught them closeness equals suffering. So they protect themselves by staying emotionally non-committal. They may focus heavily on the present moment because future attachment feels too exposing. But love slowly changes that. When an avoidant lover starts including you in their future, they are challenging their own emotional programming. They are allowing themselves to hope. They are allowing themselves to imagine permanence instead of escape. And that is not a small emotional step for them. It is transformational. What's important to recognize is that their way of expressing future commitment may not always look overly emotional or dramatic. Avoidant people often communicate love more through behavior than grand declarations. Instead of saying, "I can't live without you," they may begin making practical decisions that quietly create stability around the relationship. They make time for you consistently. They prioritize your presence. They discuss goals that include shared experiences. They begin considering how your life and their life can coexist long-term. Those actions reveal emotional intention. And perhaps one of the deepest parts of this transformation is that the avoidant person begins loosening their grip on extreme self-protection. For so long, independence may have been their emotional shield. They relied on themselves because relying on others felt unsafe. But when they begin building a future with someone emotionally, they are accepting that true love requires interdependence, not losing themselves, but allowing connection to matter. This doesn't mean fear disappears completely. Even while making future plans, avoidant individuals may still wrestle internally with vulnerability. They may occasionally become uncertain, distant, or overwhelmed by the intensity of emotional closeness. But the key difference is this: they continue moving toward connection instead of away from it. And that movement matters. Because when someone who once feared attachment begins envisioning you beside them in the future, they are no longer simply protecting their heart. They are beginning to trust love enough to build with it. One of the deepest signs an avoidant lover is falling for you is when they begin allowing themselves to need you emotionally. For most people, this may sound ordinary because healthy relationships naturally involve support, closeness, and dependence. But for someone with avoidant tendencies, needing another person can feel extremely uncomfortable, even frightening. It challenges the very emotional survival system they have relied on for years. Avoidant individuals often pride themselves on self-sufficiency. They become experts at handling life alone. They solve their own problems, manage their emotions privately, and avoid depending too heavily on anyone else. On the surface, this independence may look like strength, confidence, or emotional control. But underneath it is often a deeper fear, the fear that relying on others leads to disappointment, rejection, betrayal, or emotional pain. Many avoidant people learned early in life that emotional needs were unsafe. Maybe vulnerability was ignored. Maybe affection was inconsistent. Maybe expressing emotions led to criticism, shame, or abandonment. Over time, they unconsciously developed the belief that the safest way to survive emotionally was to rely only on themselves. They stopped expecting emotional support because expecting it once hurt too much. That is why allowing themselves to need someone becomes such a powerful act of trust. When an avoidant lover begins turning toward you during difficult moments instead of automatically isolating themselves, something significant is happening. Internally, they are slowly dismantling the emotional walls they built for protection. They are beginning to believe that closeness does not always lead to pain. This shift usually happens gradually. At first, it may appear in very small ways. They ask for your opinion on something personal. They reach out after a stressful day instead of disappearing emotionally. They share worries they normally keep hidden. They allow you to comfort them when they are overwhelmed rather than pretending. Everything is fine. These moments may not seem dramatic, but for someone who's spent years suppressing emotional needs, they represent enormous vulnerability. You see, emotionally avoidant people are often terrified of becoming dependent because dependence feels like losing control. If they need someone deeply, then that person has the power to hurt them deeply. So they keep emotional distance to maintain a sense of safety. But love slowly weakens that defense. The more emotionally safe they feel, with you, the more their heart starts craving connection instead of resisting it. And this creates an internal conflict. Part of them wants closeness. Part of them fears closeness. That's why avoidant individuals sometimes send mixed signals. They may open up emotionally one day and become distant the next. They may seek connection and then suddenly retreat. It's not always because their feelings changed. Often it's because vulnerability activates old fears they are still learning to manage, right? But despite that fear, when they continue returning to you emotionally, it means something powerful is taking place. It means they are beginning to trust your presence. It means they no longer want to carry everything alone. And for someone who built their identity around emotional independence, that shift is incredibly meaningful. There is also a profound difference between wanting someone and allowing yourself to need someone. Wanting someone can still feel emotionally safe because it maintains a sense of control, but needing someone requires surrender. It requires honesty. It requires admitting that another human being affects your emotional world deeply. Avoidant people rarely reach that place easily. That's why when they begin emotionally leaning on you, even in small ways, you are witnessing a major breakthrough in intimacy. They are no longer relating to you from behind emotional armor alone. They are letting you into the parts of themselves that feel uncertain, overwhelmed, vulnerable, or afraid. And here's something important many people overlook. When an avoidant person allows themselves to need you, they are not becoming weak. In reality, vulnerability requires far more courage than emotional detachment ever will. Anyone can hide. Anyone can disconnect. Anyone can pretend they do not care. But opening your heart after years of emotional self-protection takes incredible strength. And this is where true connection begins to form. Not in perfection, not in emotional performance, but in the willingness to let another person witness your humanity. When an avoidant lover begins allowing themselves to need your comfort, they may start to open up and be more receptive to your presence. Your support, your presence, or your understanding. They are slowly learning one life-changing truth. Love is not the loss of freedom. Love is the discovery that you no longer have to face life alone. One of the strongest signs an avoidant lover is falling for you is when their actions become more protective, intentional, and emotionally considerate. Avoidant individuals are often not naturally expressive with words. Many of them struggle to verbalize deep emotions consistently because emotional expression can feel uncomfortable or exposing. That's why if you only look for love through dramatic declarations or constant reassurance, you may completely miss how deeply they actually care. For avoidant people, love is often revealed more through behavior than conversation. When an avoidant person begins falling in love, they may experience a range of emotions, from denial to confusion to excitement to love. Their actions start changing in subtle but meaningful ways. They become more aware of your emotional well-being. They pay closer attention to your needs, your stress, your moods, and your comfort. They may not always say, "I love you deeply," but they start showing it through consistent effort, protection, and intentional presence. And this shift matters because avoidant individuals usually prioritize emotional self-preservation above everything else. They are accustomed to focusing on maintaining personal space, independence, and emotional control. Relationships can sometimes feel emotionally demanding to them, especially if vulnerability becomes intense. But when they begin investing energy into making you feel safe, valued, and cared for, it signals that your importance in their life is growing. You may notice this protectiveness in simple moments at first. They check if you got home safely. They remember small details about your life. They become attentive when something is bothering you. They try to reduce your stress even in practical ways. They become more reliable during difficult moments. They may even start adjusting their own habits or routines to create more stability in the relationship. These actions are significant because intentional effort does not come easily to emotionally avoidant people unless someone genuinely matters to them. Many avoidant individuals are careful about emotional investment. They do not naturally pour energy into relationships, where they feel emotionally detached. So when they begin consistently showing care through action, it reflects growing emotional attachment beneath the surface. What's important to understand is that avoidant people often fear emotional exposure, but actions allow them to express love in a way that feels safer than words. Words can feel vulnerable, permanent, and emotionally risky. Actions feel more manageable. So instead of endlessly talking about love, they may express it through responsibility, reliability, loyalty, and quiet acts of support. This is why many people misunderstand avoidant lovers. They mistake emotional restraint for lack of feeling. But in reality, some avoidant individuals feel emotions very deeply. They simply struggle expressing them openly because vulnerability activates fear. That fear usually comes from past emotional experiences. Perhaps they learned that opening their heart led to pain, criticism, rejection, or disappointment. Over time, they adapted by becoming emotionally guarded. They stopped freely expressing affection because emotional closeness felt unsafe. But when they begin caring for someone deeply, their heart slowly overrides those protective instincts. And one of the first places this appears is through intentional action. They begin thinking about how their choices affect you. They become more mindful of your feelings. They start trying to protect the relationship rather than keeping emotional distance from it. This protectiveness is not about control or possessiveness. Healthy protectiveness is rooted in care. It comes from genuinely wanting your emotional and physical well-being. It reflects emotional investment. An avoidant person who once focused mostly on protecting themselves begins caring about protecting the connection they share with you. That is a major transformation because love changes priorities. Someone who once avoided emotional responsibility starts becoming emotionally present. Someone who once kept one foot out the door begins acting with greater consistency and thoughtfulness. Their attention shifts from simply preserving independence to nurturing connection. And perhaps one of the most beautiful aspects of this change is that it often happens quietly. There may be no dramatic announcement, no overwhelming emotional confession. Instead, there is steady effort, presence, reliability, thoughtfulness, small sacrifices, increased attentiveness, quiet loyalty. Those things may seem ordinary, but they are not ordinary for someone who spent years emotionally guarded. Every intentional act becomes evidence of emotional opening. Every protective gesture becomes proof that your happiness affects them deeply. Every effort to care for you reflects a heart slowly learning how to love safely. Because at the end of the day, real love is not only something people say. It is something they consistently choose through their actions, their presence, and their willingness to care, beyond their own fears. So remember this. When an avoidant lover begins opening their heart, they may find it difficult to let go of their fears and insecurities. Showing consistency, including you in their future, allowing themselves to need you, and loving you through intentional actions, you are witnessing a powerful transformation of the soul. Real love is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet courage, slow trust, and the decision to stay despite fear. The greatest relationships are built when two people create safety, growth, and emotional truth together. Thank you for listening. Thank you for opening your heart to deeper understanding, and never forget, love has the power to heal what fear once tried to protect. Stay strong, stay patient, and keep choosing growth. Goodbye, and I'll see you in the next journey.